Tonight on our front, counting the cost of that particular termination of the agreement with the U.S. government, which actually culminated into us getting PDS having to manage the private sector participation requirement of our deal that is now falling through. What is beyond the 190 million US dollars? Are we risking a relationship with the United States of America? What's effectively the way forward? That's the crux of our engagement on our front. You're welcome back. My name is Raymond Darkwa. This is UPfront. With me here in studio is a former member of the MIDA board. And that needs to be put in proper perspective because it's interesting that he served on that particular board. He's a former power minister too. But Dr. Konado will be sharing some thoughts with us, very much so. Before then, let me get to the phone lines and speak to a man who has extraordinary competence in international trade, international organizations, and very much with everything within that particular space of international relations. Dr. Vladimir Chudansu, you're welcome to our front.
Thank you very much.
Doc, there is already the fear that beyond the 190 million US dollars, Ghana risks having been on the wrong side of the United States of America by a termination of the PDS deal. Already, the communication with our government has sensed and indicated that they are not very much happy by our decision. Did we just make the wrong move?
I wouldn't think so. I think the panic we are exerting on ourselves is unfounded. This is why there is something called international diplomacy. This is why there is international relations in the first place at all. That a country behaves in a way another country doesn't like, or they have consensus on something, or they totally disagree on things. And so it doesn't change anything. China is in trade talks with America after both had, spilled whatever is on each other. Spain and the U.S. have fought several times over tuna fishing. And we have had these things in international relations. So the very fact that we did something and they didn't like it doesn't mean that we are going to bear the wrath of America in some other areas again. It depends on how we handle the aftermath of our withdrawal and how we handle the issue.
Government already believes there's a greater risk that we may not be able to qualify for the third MIDA arrangement. That's the third engagement on the compact. That's what government believes there's a greater risk. In fact, people like Professor Akila Pasoya believes that we are not going to be taken serious by other donor institutions, and that is a bigger problem that we have on our hands. You don't think that we are in a very big perilous situation?
No, I don't think I'll go on that tangent, because this one issue is just one of many. Supposing we renege on our democratic credentials and walk the path of dictatorial, whatever it is, that would have spelled a bigger doom. But that we are using democratic space to say that, look, this thing is wrong, let's do this, let's do that. I do not think it means that other countries are going to say we are not, trustworthy or that sort of thing. This is one of many to come. And this is not the end of any kind of altercation with any other country. The point is this, that we are rather politicizing this thing in Ghana. We are calling for panic, which does not exist. Government saw something which it thinks, and every government thinks as a rational actor, it thinks is wrong, and they acted. After acting, one other government said, no, I don't agree with you. The next stage is dialogue. Finished. The next stage is diplomacy. And I am told that our government delegation on the 18th was in the U.S. And this is how to go about the thing. But to call on yourself that panic situation, you are allowing your opponent to take cue from that and begin to master the variables against you. I don't think that there's cause for panic at all. We must be resilient in our policy stance, know what went wrong, why it went wrong, appeal to the Americans that, look, this is why we should have done this. If we didn't, a worse thing would have happened. That's all we need to do. But that we shouldn't have done this, and then we bear the brunt. They bring their money, take their money away. I don't believe so.
Now, there are those who believe that this was not needed in the first place. You could have avoided it. If we had first decided to be a little bit more vigilant in our quest to securing a private sector participant in this case. The other group of people who also insist that since the demand guarantee matter has been deemed by a country with more stringent procedure like the United States to be not a big issue, insisting that our termination is unwarranted, we could have just let it go, then continue with the current processes, which will not cost us a pesewa anyway, rather than risking the 190 million we just did, and the relationship with a superpower.
Well, it is their thinking. I don't think that if you are a small power, you are unable to know what is good for your country. After all, a country's sovereignty lies in how best you are able to resolve your own problem. And I believe that when government saw that the deal was bad, Americans knew, the MCA knew that the choice of those persons they even recommended was very wrong. And that's the angle we have to hit hard, because it is happening all over the world where superpowers use their muscle to outmuscle us because they know they are wrong. Yes, from now on, we would be very diligent. Maybe there was a mistake somewhere. But look at the situation where they were using our own money to I mean, how do I call it? I mean, to make sure that the agreement we have signed with them works. That is, they put in nothing, but then they use that. Then the ECG could have done that. So everything was wrong ab initio with what we have done. Now we stick to correcting. They don't want the correction we have. Less dialogue. I believe this is the way to go. And to say that we shouldn't have said anything, that in the future, other companies will do the same thing to us.
Finally, the conversation is moved to the point where people are demanding, so what's the way forward? Are we going to beg the Americans for forgiveness for our sins?
Well, in diplomacy, there's nothing like begging. In diplomacy, you show your way, ability to let your adversary or even opponent or your interlocutor listen to your side of the bargain. Pick something from it, lose something, and you lose something too, and you gain. So this way, we need to prove to the Americans that there can be a win-win situation in this MCA, whatever it is that they launch, if and only if they listen to our side of the story, and if we also listen to them, for them to help us ameliorate the situation. But if we go in a belligerent way, it doesn't help. If they come in a belligerent way, it doesn't help. But they'll have the muscle, we must understand that. So the way forward is continue dialoguing. But our policy stand, we shouldn't shrink our policy space. That is the base of many African countries.
Doc, I'll not waste so much of your time, and I appreciate your time with us this evening. Many thanks to you for sharing those thoughts. Dr. Vladimir Chidanso is a competent man in the area of international relations and how states engage, whether through corporations established to act for and on their behalf, or even non-state actors. And he's been sharing some thoughts with us on what the risk is today for us deciding to, some say, call the bluff of the United States of America on these matters. Now, we'll be speaking to the electricity company of Ghana that's just resumed control of what was rightfully theirs in the first place. Let's get that thought coming up in the minutes from now. But I did tell you that my guest is a former member of the MIDA board, and I am choosing not to call you the member of parliament. I'm choosing not to call you the former power minister. Basically, I want you to be able to explain to us how the MIDA itself works, because you're a former member of that particular board. But let me welcome you once again. Doc, you're welcome.
Thank you.
I hope you are doing well this day.
Well,
you had demanded and insisted that cancellation or termination of that particular deal was the only way forward for you. It has happened. You obviously are excited, aren't you?
I wish I could say that I am excited. I am not, because we ought not to have even gotten into that stage. It was an avoidable mistake. It was so avoidable.
The Americans disagree with you.
Well, they can disagree. That is the essence of democracy. I insist that it was avoidable because we need not have even gone that route.
Okay.
Look, at the crux of all this is the inability of the Ghanaian partners selected to come up with money.
Yeah.
And did we have to go that route? Did we have to select people who didn't have the financial wherewithal?
Could he have determined prior to engaging them whether or not they had the financial wherewithal?
Of course. That is why we do due diligence. If we had done our due diligence, not just on Miracle, not just on the Angolan Energia, but even on our own indigenous people we had selected, we would not have gotten into this mess.
I get you.
Yeah, and that is why I can't even celebrate, because we ought not to have gotten there. Yes, if we wanted indigenous participation, we ought to have examined a few more issues. Are there Ghanaian companies, indigenous companies, who can raise the needed? If we wanted 51% equity, it meant every year they would have had to inject minimum $51 million into ECG for 5 years.
Okay.
Do we have the Ghanaian companies with that capacity? If we have, were they those we chose? These are the fundamental issues. These are the lessons learned that as a nation we must take on board.
I'll take a step back, just one step back. And because I've been consistently introducing you as a former member of the MIDA board, because you rightfully were a member, yes. I've seen your swearing in pictures where you were put on that particular board.
No, every energy minister has been a member
of the MIDA board.
It's an institutional representation. It is the minister. The finance minister is also a member.
Okay, that's interesting to know.
Yeah.
Now, as a former member of the MIDA board, could MIDA have done anything different from what happened in the current situation?
Absolutely.
What could they have done differently?
It was the same MIDA that had the request for interest indicated 20% local content, in that the board had examined the financial implications of how much equity local partners can come up with.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And therefore, MIDA decided that, look, if it's 20%, we think there are some Ghanaian companies that can come up with 20%. At worst, some of those companies could be carried by the majority shareholder. The foreign companies which tendered were to name their indigenous companies that they were coming into the transaction with.
Okay.
And therefore, that was the position of the MIDA board. But MIDA is only a Ghana government agency.
Okay.
MIDA would take instructions from the policy direction of government.
Of government?
Precisely.
Not the MCC?
No. MCC.
But of the Ghanaian government?
Precisely. It's made up of only Ghanaian officials. The only MCC people who sit in our observers.
I see.
Yes.
So we cannot postulate MIDA as a representation of the MCC?
I have had a problem with MIDA in the past. Sometimes the staff of MIDA, their posture is as if they are more reticent to MCC than to the government of Ghana. But MIDA is established by an act of government, act of parliament, as a Ghanaian parastatal, as a Ghanaian authority, with wholly Ghanaian representation. It's only the government's instrument to implement the compact.
I see. Now, when you mention the 80-20, 51-49 issue, today the information minister responded to that question about whether or not that was part of our problems. And his response was that Ghana sees nothing wrong with the way it structured its engagement on the concession. Indeed, Ghana has always wanted a deep end to the stick in this particular case, and that's what we demanded. And that we felt that was in our collective interest as a state, not to basically sell off, which was not really the appropriate terminology in there as we know it to be, sell off our assets or give the concession without having to protect part of it for our state.
I'm glad that you recognize it was not the appropriate terminology.
Yeah, because it wasn't a sell off.
It was a lease. You are only leasing the management of your asset to them. You still maintain ownership of the asset. So it could not have been a sell-off. So That to start.
Okay.
Look, if we had not gone into this debacle, or if the administrators of the system had administered the system better and that we had not run into these financial difficulties, then they could have been right. If we got Ghanaian companies, private sector companies, who could support their 51% equity with cash,
Okay.
then I would not have had any problem. But when you create a situation where you cannot support that proposition with the financial wherewithal, then there is a challenge. And we are in this mess because the consortium could not pull together the money.
Which was probably because we chose the wrong team in the first place.
Yeah. How we cobble together the team is worthy of investigation. Was there any transparent process in choosing the Ghanaian companies? If there was, what went wrong? If there wasn't, how were they chosen? How were they chosen?
I see.
Were they just invited because somebody knew somebody and somebody knew somebody? We must investigate that as well.
You are in Parliament. All of this went through Parliament, right?
Yes, they went through Parliament.
And you okayed it.
We conditionally okayed it because we demanded to see some final documentation, such as the guarantees. Parliament decided that, look, we'll give you provisional approval. However, you cannot hand over the asset until we see you produce all this documentation.
Did you get these documents?
Unfortunately, we didn't.
So you're bypassed.
We're bypassed.
You people did not take it as serious as you should have taken it previously.
Look, if you know the way Parliament works, some members of Parliament from both sides were uncomfortable. But unfortunately, and this is unfortunate for me as a member of Parliament to say, the Ghanaian Parliament legislature vis-a-vis the executive, particularly when a ruling party has such an absolute majority, becomes weakened.
The Ghanaian Parliament is weakened.
Yes, by the sort of majority the MPP has presently.
So that's what prevented you from doing your job?
The 169 to 106. There's a limit. Indeed, some parliamentarians claimed, some of the older parliamentarians claimed that probably the best parliament we've had in the First Republic was the first parliament under President Kufuor, where the majority was only 4.
A very slim majority.
Very slim majority. And so there was a lot more consensus.
Okay.
When we have such a huge majority,
the tendency to
ignore
away the minority is high.
Yeah, it's very high.
So these issues you raised as minority, but they were ignored.
Yes, even on the committee, including, to be fair, including some members from the majority on the Committee of Mines and Energy. In fact, we unanimously said we want to see the documentation.
And yet it was not provided.
It was not provided.
You didn't suspect malice then?
No, because you see, a certain assurance was given that all the documentation will be in place, perfectly in place, before the asset is handed over. And quite often, Parliament has given conditional approvals. Let me give you one example.
Consistently?
Yes.
That's what you guys do?
Let's give you one example. The AGM block takeover.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Parliament approved subject and gave the minister 6 months to ensure that the indigenous Ghanaian partner in the old agreement, his rights were restored.
I see.
So Parliament can approve with a caveat, with conditions, do this, do this. It is expected that the executive arm will respect that conditional approval.
Now, I started a conversation with Dr. Vladimir Chidanso about the other repercussions of having to cancel this particular arrangement. Already, the likes of Professor Akila Pasoya are saying that it is way deeper than we think of just 190 million. It's the perception that the other donor institutions across the world will have of us. It's how stranded institutions will think that we are not so serious a grouping to deal with in the first place. Is that a bigger risk we are overlooking?
Well, I like the word risk. a risk may not necessarily materialize.
That's true.
Depending on how you manage that risk. Yes, of course, there's the regional compact.
Yes.
And if I were sitting on the board of MCC, I probably will not include Ghana
On the regional compact.
on the regional compact.
We're likely to lose that.
I won't be surprised if we lose our participation in the regional compact.
Is that a big deal?
Yes and no. Yes, because if we're just happy to receive grants and see that as free money, then it's a big deal.
Oh, we are not beyond aid yet.
Then it's a big deal. However, if we see this, the discipline imposed by this, the conditions that come with some of these grants, if we see the discipline as worth pursuing on its own, then with or without the grant, we will pursue the discipline. If we take that option, then we will not have lost anything.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because government, there's a point about how government thinks we still need to negotiate or speak to the Americans on the way forward. We are still interested in the next ones. Is it going to happen?
Well, I wouldn't know, but again, nations do not always agree.
Okay.
And yet, nations can always find a common ground. So depending on our negotiating position, how we explain our conduct behind the scenes, the initial disagreement, it's over.
You sitting in this seat some months, barely a month ago, called for the head of some specific government officials, from the finance ministry through to the energy ministry. Mindful of what has happened now, would you stand by those calls?
Yes, I would.
Really?
I would.
After we have cancelled it and we are back to square one.
You see, that is...
We are back to square one on this matter.
How much time have we lost?
I mean, over a period of some time.
Yes.
Since March, even before that time.
Before that
Yes,
time,
before
we
that
have
time.
lost so much time.
Probably sunk in resources too.
Sunk in resources in all these media meetings, all the consultants that we have had to engage, etc. But most importantly, there's also reputational damage
To which
to the
institution?
country,
Ghana.
to Ghana, because we messed up with the management of the process.
We did.
We did. If we didn't, we would have dictated that the demand guarantees were not worth the paper they were written on. And it is not rocket science.
This is proud. This is somewhere around the
Prior
February
to-
2018,
prior to handing over,
2019.
precisely.
Yes.
Or even earlier.
Okay.
Once we had selected PDS, and remember, we lost the benefit of international competitive tendering, again as a result of process. Because virtually PDS was the only company standing.
So the time that we were willing to go ahead with them.
Precisely. So we lost that benefit. Could we have gone back to our partners and said, look, the essence of international competitive bidding is to get the best terms. We are in a situation where we are left with just one company. Those are things we could have done, could have discussed, etc. So, and I don't want to believe that as a people, we don't have the competence to manage a process, international process such as this.
Do we do?
I believe we
You
do.
think so?
I believe we have the human capital.
Competence were in the ministries or the
You
MEDA?
see, government has at its disposal the competence of Ghanaians in and out of government.
Oh, okay.
Let me give you an example. I served as Deputy Minister for Energy at a point in charge of petroleum.
Yeah.
When we were under the leadership of Dr. Tiaje, then the minister, when we had to deal with the Jubilee POD, Plan of Development,
Yeah.
we got help from Ghanaians, even in the diaspora, on their own. People flew here to assist us,
Oh, I see.
irrespective of political color. They were just Ghanaian technocrats who said, this is our country, at our own expense. Some came from Saudi Aramco, Ghanaians in top management positions, came over a weekend, will come and meet Dr. Tiaje to assist, because this is their country. So there is a bank of expertise available to the Ghanaian state as and when the Ghanaian state wants to deploy or wants to use this expertise. And so, yes, I'm very confident we have the human capital as a nation. But we decided, the managers of the process decided to do a shoddy job.
But the Deputy Minister for Energy did not believe so. Orekwedu believes that the President and the Ghanaian government should be commended for standing up and standing on this ground and detecting the problem, reversing the problem when the need arose at the right time, and doing what is right at this time.
That argument worries me. We all went to primary school. I went to Yeji LA number 2 primary.
I see.
Yeji LA number 2 middle. That's what schools I went to.
Okay.
I went primary school, up to middle school. When you're given an exercise and you get it wrong, you do correction.
Yeah.
When you do correction and eventually you get all right, are you given excellent for correction?
Maybe seen.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So why should we applaud government
For correcting this.
for correcting its own mistakes? That is what my good friend Oriku, my colleague, is asking us to do. The best is sin. And the most important is, what are the lessons going forward
that we can
that
learn
as
from
a
them?
nation we must learn from? Process management. Too often we come up with lofty plans, lofty programs, but we implement them so poorly because we don't take our time to do what we call process management. So we don't get the outcomes.
Okay.
And that is a typical example. We could have managed this process better. We ought to have known from the word go that the PDS as a consortium did not have the financial wherewithal. In any case, then there's the argument of even Miracle offloading its interest to another entity. Did we even demand for a parent company guarantee?
We should have.
We ought to. Look, again, coming from the oil sector, by the laws of Ghana, every company that gets a concession and signs a petroleum agreement must be registered in Ghana. So Talo has Talo Ghana. But we know Talo Ghana will not have the financial muscle. And therefore, in our negotiation with Talo Ghana, we asked for a parent company guarantee.
I see.
These are things we do in the energy sector. We didn't do any of that.
There's a question about whether MEDA did due diligence. Mindful of the fact that you've been on the board before, do you think that MEDA could have done something different from what they did currently?
Absolutely.
What could they have done differently?
MEDA and the Ministry of Finance and the Attorney General could have done a far better job at due diligence. Due diligence is to ensure that the entity you intend dealing with has the credentials, has the financial capability, has the technical and managerial capability to handle the assets the way you want the assets handled. If we had done that and done that well, you can go through the motions, but that is not doing it well. If we had done that well, we would have known even before handing over that, look, we'll have a financial problem. Particularly when they can't even raise money to pay for the premium of the demand guarantee and have to fall on ECG resources.
To be able to do that.
To be able to do that.
After
that was a major red flag.
But that was seen just close to the time that they had to actually do
So,
it.
what stopped us? If you get,
But
if you are
we're racing
driving
against time.
Listen,
We needed this compact and the managers came along with it.
Racing against time.
Yes.
Does that justify doing the wrong thing? Because you have to beat time?
That's interesting.
It doesn't.
Of course, it doesn't justify that.
It doesn't.
Doc, give me a second. Let me go to the phone lines because already the ECG issued a statement today on the 23rd of October 2019 on the termination of private sector participation transaction agreement between ECG and PDS. And it makes reference to some things. It says all stakeholders and customers should therefore engage ECG in their normal business activities, which include, but are not limited to, metering, billing, distribution of bills, bill recognition, and all the other things that's mentioned there. Luckily, I have on the phone lines the public relations officer of the Electricity Company of Ghana, Dan Ejelabi. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Now, first and foremost, this statement that you issued, does it mean that all the activities you have listed here, the metering, the billing, the distribution of bills, all of them take immediate effect as ECG immediately resumed control of every single activity PDS was doing?
Yes, we've taken full control of all the distribution and sales retail operations of the company.
We're given to understand that when the PDS came on board, virtually every worker who previously belonged to ECG was made to sign an agreement with PDS to be their workers now. What's the mode of transition, or you have taken over the workers immediately too?
Yes, yeah. What brought us to this, where we are now, was the fact that it's been established that there was no demand guarantee, which rendered the whole transaction null and void. So everything reversed.
Okay, so the entire transaction was null and void in this case, including the contracts with the staff.
Exactly, because if that condition present was satisfied, then we wouldn't be where we are today. So it seems not to have been transferred.
Okay.
I mean, the company not to have been transferred.
I get you. Now, there was the understanding that is the PDS workers as we have it today, are they entitled to the same remuneration, conditions of service, and all the other things that they used to have when they were under PDS, now that they are back to ECG?
Yes.
And nothing is going to change in that direction?
Nothing is going to change. Nothing changes.
They are guaranteed the space of work they used to have. There are not going to be any layoffs. Is that what you're saying?
No one laid off. No involuntary laid off. Nobody will lose his job. And we emphasize on that.
Some of these workers opposed the coming on board of PDS, but they finally ended up working with PDS in the final space. Now that they are getting back to ECG, have they already been consulted on this process, and have they given their approval to getting back to ECG?
You don't need to consult since the transaction was null and void. This is the legal issue that we are dealing with. But in any case, we have engaged the union leadership and everything is similar.
Oh, I see.
We didn't see any problem, yes.
Have the union leadership already expressed their backing for the return of these workers to what used to be ECG workers?
I don't think the union leadership, I don't speak for them.
Okay.
But I'm just conjecturing that they will oppose what is happening now, because in everybody's interest. I'm also a worker, so the most important thing is we are all keeping our job.
I see.
We receive our salary and every condition that we were enjoying, and that is the most important thing in giving our services to the company.
There is a part of the conversation today that was interesting. You in ECG, you were tasked to probe PDS, especially on the issue of demand guarantees and how they were financed. When is this probe commencing?
It started long before the transfer date. But you will realize that we got the guarantee some few days, I think 2 days before the transfer date. And then
in order not to be seen like we were thwarting the transfer, as has always been said, we accepted it in form, pending further investigation to authenticate the guarantee. So I think we've discussed this over and over again why this thing came late.
Sorry, my actual question is to find out from you.
Yes.
I understand that the kind of probe you're expected to do is about how they took monies from the proceeds of PDS and not from the shareholders to be able to finance 11 out of the 12.25 demanded for the demand guarantees. That's the question I'm asking. When is that kind of probe starting?
No, we didn't call that probe. What we did was authenticate the guarantee. So if there is an issue like that, maybe I don't know about that.
Okay. Now, the final question on all of this is there anything going to change? Are you going to change what used to be PDS cards with stickers and all of the other changes? Are we going to have an entire paraphernalia reversion to the old ECG? And how soon is that going to take?
Definitely it has to change because there are two different companies and you can't wear somebody's paraphernalia when you are using a different thing. It will be done gradually. I mean, all cannot be done tomorrow. So the major one will be done. And I hope within some few weeks. In fact, the vehicles one is not an issue. It can be done within a day or two because we still have the stickers around, but we just remove it and put it on the vehicle. But those that will take a little time are the furnaces on the buildings and the substations and other installations.
Now, not long ago, the PDS issued a statement saying that it had reduced the debt of ECG when it took over. It also said that it actually reduced the number of outages that we're having over the period since it took over. Now, it also said generally it has improved and even brought down the losses that you used to have in this setup. Are these things that ECG can independently verify and proceed to doing the same thing to assure Ghanaians that as for power supply is going to remain stable and there won't be any difficulties at all?
Yes, I'm happy you said we should verify. So allow us to verify and then get to those instances so that you compare with our performance. And then the most important thing is going forward, we will improve our services for Ghanaians to be happy. And that is what we are all aiming at.
I guess we can leave it off here, and I'm grateful to you for joining us here today. Many thanks to you, sir.
Very much, Raymond.
Yao Ejelabi speaks for the Electricity Company of Ghana, and you sure know that now, in the letter that they issued, they are taking over every single process that the PDS used to do previously. As for the recently touted plaudits of PDS, they are saying that they have to verify those and it will take them some time to transition fully into the new one. They don't expect any layoffs. They don't expect the conditions of service of the workers to also change. I'm coming back in studio. Doc, is it reasonably expected that the workers who sign contracts with PDS can just be rolled over to ECG?
The workers were seconded.
Oh, okay. They were seconded?
They were seconded. The arrangement was to second them to PDS. And therefore, coming back to the mother entity, just like the assets of the company remained with ECG. And that is why if you see their vehicles, even with the PDS stickers, you still see ECG on it because ECG remained the owner of the asset. But let me quickly clear this. If PDS claims that they have reduced the debts of ECG, it cannot be factual. One of the conditions before the handing over was to ring-fence existing debt.
But so they issued a statement to make that point.
Existing debt was not passed on to PDS.
I see.
Existing debt. And remember, when the Chamber of Generating Companies, the IPPs, demanded from PDS, it was government that came in to advance some 200 million cedis at a point.
That's true.
From the ESLA. PDS, what PDS was to do, and probably might have done, is to meet current obligations arising out of their operations. So what they can then say is that they have probably reduced the accumulation of debts. The accumulation of new debts, they probably would have improved on that. But the debts before handing over were not PDS's business. They were ring-fenced.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is one thing.
Are you also disputing the fact that they say they have reduced tremendously the rate at which power outages were happening across the country, and again, they have improved the system?
It depends on what you describe as tremendous. Remember, all the way from December 2015, we had seen improvements. And so there has been a continuum of the improvement.
I see.
For example, in 2016, ECG made profits. For the first time in a long while, they actually made profits. So the new processes which were introduced were expecting that there will be continuous process improvement leading to improved efficiency, therefore leading to lower technical and commercial losses.
I see.
Yes, so yes, one of the things I can personally credit PDS, it has been the response time. The response time to force had improved.
Oh, okay.
And that was expected. And therefore, yes, there are things we have to take on board in the new dispensation. Supervision. The bane of state-owned enterprise, state-owned enterprise has been the inadequate supervision, all the way from education.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Look, in my hometown, Yeji, you will find out that on the average, teachers in public schools are more qualified than teachers in private schools.
Yeah.
Yet the private schools tend to do better.
Than the...
And the difference is supervision. The owners of the private schools pay far more attention to supervision. So going forward, I expect that ECG would have learned one or two things from especially Miracle.
I see.
Yes, so let's take that forward. But even with that Miracle's intervention, short intervention, ECG was also already on some process improvement. And a part of the compact also went into the management improvement. So even before PDS took over. So the most important thing is going forward. What are our options? And that is why I call for a pause. We must not rush into another process.
We understand that the finance minister in a couple of weeks will be addressing the nation on how we are going to go about a private sector participant replacement anytime soon.
Well,
what are your expectations?
Well, I don't expect anything.
Really?
Yes. But what I will advise is that let's pause. Let's not rush into any new arrangement. Are we going into some new arrangement to please the Americans, MCC?
Okay.
Are we going into an arrangement because we think that is a better option? It mitigates the mess we have created? Or is a total lack of confidence in ECG, even with the lessons learned, to continue? I will call for a pause. Let's have a national discussion. What do we do with ECG? There can be a management contract.
I see.
We can go to the stock exchange, part listing. We can call for a new international competitive tender. We have options. So let's not rush to box ourselves into just one option in a panic.
Now, there's this question that the minister responded to today that was interesting. The minister says there was nothing wrong with switching from the bank guarantee to the insurance guarantee, a process that was supervised by the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana. And the main basis for it is that the PURC was just not ready with the tariff setting. So it would have been very difficult to convince any bank in this country to aid us in getting this demand guarantee.
If the entities were credible,
yeah,
on the back of their balance sheet
alone,
they can get a bank guarantee. Remember, the Minister of
regardless of whether the tariffs have been set.
The Minister of Finance wrote a letter to PDS and MIDA that any shortfall arising out of the inability of PURC to set the tariff will be borne by the state. That commitment was made by the Minister of Finance. So that commitment is also a government guarantee to PDS on the tariff. With that, credible participants would have raised a bank guarantee. And so I get worried if the minister says there's nothing wrong. I mean, insurance guarantee and bank guarantee are not the same. One is stronger. In fact, it was not just any bank guarantee. It was a AA rated bank guarantee. It was not just any bank guarantee. And of course, I can understand why the minister will say that, but the two are not the same. If they were the same, why would they change them?
No judgment debt would arise. That's what they are saying too. Do you agree?
Judgment, well, it's too early to say that. Assuming PDS decides to go to court, and assuming a court of competent jurisdiction, or even they decide to follow the arbitration process in the contract, and there's a ruling against Ghana, then of course judgment debt will arise. But at this stage, nobody knows what PDS will do. There are two parties in a contract. One has terminated. If the other party decides to insist on its rights by either going for international arbitration or going to court, and if ruling is in their favor, then judgment debt will arise. If ruling is not in their favor, then there will be no judgment debt
in the offing anytime soon. Now, there was an accusation on the NDC too. In fact, the minister stated categorically that the NDC only sought to make political capital out of this particular issue and consistently sought to pitch Ghana against the USA. And NDC engaged in distortions, which indicated that the Akufo-Addo government conspired to favor PDS one way or the other. The allegation was that the NDC, instead of taking the side of the people of this republic, joined the forces to now say the US is right, the US ought to deal with us in ways that, and you are going against what is supposed to be the interest of the state.
I mean, it is unfortunate if you accuse a political party of making political capital. If you create the conditions,
political parties will make political capital.
Of course. If you,
but not with falsehood.
Not with what has been false with.
It says that people accuse the government, the president, of having interest in PDS.
Look, I personally will not go to the president.
Yes.
I personally will not go to the president. But is there no cause for that?
Is there?
How were they chosen?
How was PDS chosen?
The Ghanaian participants, how were they chosen? Was there a tender? Have we ever been told how we chose them?
Were they not chosen how they are always chosen?
How? No. In the original request for interest, you were to come with your partner. Okay. But this time, Miracle was chosen and asked to put together a Ghanaian team. So, if this process is not transparent, then observers can deduce all sorts of reasoning. If choosing the Ghanaian, if for example had been thrown to AGI, that look, AGI come out with 50 with Ghanaian companies who have the capacity to take out 51%, and AGI brought a list, then no one will say it's transparent.
Is it Is your basis the fact that some of the people on the other side were politically exposed persons, or you just needed to make political capital out of the situation?
Excuse me, if you bring in, look, remember that the Minister of Finance also wrote a letter purporting to appoint another lawyer, another known MPP sympathizer,
Okay.
to restructure the Ghanaian component.
Yeah.
How does government take on itself the duty of restructuring a private entity if the entity is truly private?
The claim on government side is that it's because they realized there could be a problem. That's why they sought to fix it. And because of the political capital, that's why it didn't happen.
So, if you realize there's a problem, what was the problem? That the people didn't have the capacity.
Yes.
So why choose them in the first place?
But that's why they say they fixed the problem. I mean, they realized the problem, they are fixing the problem.
No. Did they fix the problem?
That's the attempt they wanted to do so. And it was because of the backlash.
Was that the right route?
To fix that problem.
Was that the right route?
You don't think so?
No, if they are, you see, it goes against the ethos of the private sector participation.
Okay.
If this is the private sector, if there's a challenge, call on them to produce the necessary financial backup. If they don't, take steps to terminate that.
I see.
You don't try through the back door to restructure their shareholding.
Now, there's a question, I asked you about this question early on. Should heads roll on this matter?
Absolutely.
Which specific heads must roll?
There should be a thorough investigation of the process mismanagement. Let that investigation come up with who let Ghana down. But essentially, politicians must take responsibility.
And by that you mean who? The president?
No.
The vice president?
Look, there are two key ministers who represented the political class in all this. The Minister of Finance, who is the owner of ECG on behalf of the Ghanaian people.
Okay.
And the sector minister
Of energy?
of energy, who presides over the sector. They are directly responsible. Of course, the vice president presided over a meeting.
Yes, just a meeting.
A meeting that watered down the demands.
Yes.
But I won't go there. But it is not for nothing that the Minister of Finance sits on the middle board. He's the owner of the company. He also sits on the middle board, and every financial transaction has to be approved by him. That is why he's writing all the letters.
But the
because
minister,
he signed the compact as well.
The Minister of Trade also sits on the middle board.
Yes. Minister of Trade sits on it as a government representative. The Minister of Trade does not own the company.
Okay.
The Minister of Trade did not sign the compact. The Minister of Trade does not supervise the sector.
So, finance and energy must answer questions?
Yes, they must answer questions.
Are you willing to push this in Parliament? Or you think that the probe should come from the executive?
It must be an executive decision. Look, as a nation, we've gone into this mess.
So, and who should do this? Is it the president or the vice president?
The president.
Okay.
The vice president only assists the president.
I see.
Just like the cabinet itself only assists the president.
I see.
So the president has the executive power, he's the executive authority of the state.
And he should order a probe into this engagement?
Yes, I will advise that we, if for nothing, to know what went wrong in order not to repeat it again. If for nothing. Because this is such a monumental embarrassment to us as a people.
Okay.
And therefore, what did we do wrong?
Doc, the same time is up, and it's great as usual to have you join us here today. Many thanks to you. Dr. Kwabena Donkor is a former power minister. He's a member of parliament. He's also a former MIDA board member. That's the more reason why he joined us here today on the latest development of the PDS debacle. As we now know, PDS is finally exited the People's Republic's private participation scheme, and ECG is back at work. You've seen their statement, and they have an impending probe, which Dr. Kwabena Donkor is saying that should be extended to those at the helms of the energy and the finance ministries. Folks, thank you so much for joining us on today's edition.